Hello. 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 Thank you, Tim. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to the most important event of the whole conference, hello, I heard a bit of a way over there. Absolutely. So, good, I'll take that. Right, first things first, I'm Andy Cook, I'm the CSJ's Chief Executive, and we are here to discuss some of the biggest issues going on in the country right now for those that are most struggling, and to see if this is the party to change their lives and change their fortunes. There's a couple of practical things I want to talk about first. There should be a QR code on this screen. Is there a QR code? Is it on there? I can't hear you. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Right, that QR code, you can put your vote in for your candidate at the start of this entire thing. Tim Montgomery only has a Nokia 3210, so he's unable to do such an operation. So if you want to put your vote in of who you're voting for, don't worry, it won't be public. We won't put it out there yet. We're going to take votes for who you all want to vote for now, and then we will take the votes at the end of this and see if anything has changed. Does everyone get the rules of engagement? We all get that? Sorry, Miriam? It's a secret ballot. Don't worry, Miriam, your vote won't be put public unless for a certain price. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to do that now. So can everyone get the QR code, those that have got phones that are modern, and do such a thing, and put your vote in? And then we will do it again later on. That's right, Matthew? I got it right. Okay. Secondly, just so everyone's aware, the rules of engagement for the candidates tonight, we're going to hear from all 4 candidates. They have 20 minutes each. How they use those 20 minutes is down to them. They've got 5 minutes if they want at the lectern to give their social justice credentials, and then the aim is to give a chance for questions from all of you guys. So we will be looking for questions on social justice issues. And the third point I want to say is this is the Centre for Social Justice. We are interested in those that are most struggling in this country. So any questions that go beyond there, they will be cut off. You may have met our chairman, he's very fierce and very strong. So if your question goes on for too long, you will be cut off. If your question's not on our issues, you will be cut off. We are interested in the issues we care about. Does everyone understand? I feel like really strong here, giving this punchy, yeah. But above all, I do want to say, Iain's going to say a few words now. Iain had a 1% chance of winning his seat in this last election. And it's our 20th year of the CSJ, and we could not be more proud to be serving a man who's driven this agenda for so long. So Iain is going to be chairing tonight. Over to you.
It was less than 1% chance. But I'm not going to quibble about that. I did have my differences with the BBC about that particular prediction, but no, what can I say? You've always got to get something wrong every now and then. Can I say thank you, everyone, for being here? Andy's read the rules. We will have all 4 candidates here tonight. The objective tonight is to examine something that doesn't always get discussed, but should be at the heart of our politics. As Conservatives, we aren't heartless. We don't just want to be, as we're often portrayed, as Conservatives are portrayed, to be only in favour of those who can manage, work well, and have lots of money. Quite the contrary, actually. We're believers in helping people to become important, strong, and driven individuals, and to give them work, and to help them find work, and to help them mend their lives. So that's really the position of what we do for CSJ and the Centre for Social Justice. And this year is the 20th anniversary, which I think Andy said, 20th anniversary of the setting up of the Centre for Social Justice, and we have produced more policies than any other organisation that have gone to the heart of government, Conservative and Labour governments, and that's how we intend it to be. So tonight, as Andy said, I hope you'll take this as an opportunity to ask about that end of politics, about what each individual who's standing to be potentially the leader of the Conservative Party, what do they care about when it comes to those who didn't get born with a silver spoon in the mouth? What do they care about those who struggle every day to actually be able to get beyond the families and their difficulties that they have, and to rise above all that and to drive themselves, their families and their communities? What about those that often get left behind? That's what this is all about tonight, because we can all go out and sound the normal mantras of what everybody expects a Conservative to say, But the question tonight is, can you think about what you ought to say, not what you're expected to say? So tonight I would ask you all to ask those sort of questions. I don't mind if somebody puts their hand up and asks the same question again to somebody else. I don't mind that at all. I will try and pick people, though, on a wider variety. And when you do, please keep your questions, as Andy said, tight, because I really want to make sure that those who are answering them keep them tight and don't talk this out. They have a limited amount of time. So I think we're still waiting for the first candidate. Are we? We have. And so it is Tom Tugendhat. I'm going to ask Tom to come to the floor.
Iain, it's lovely to see you. Well, my friends, it is an enormous pleasure to see you. It is very, very good to be amongst such friends because this year, I don't know how many of you know, but this is the 20th anniversary of the CSJ. Now, some of us were at a birthday party for it only recently, and I tell you what we were celebrating. We weren't just celebrating Iain's amazing success or Andy's hard work or Tim's inspiration. We were celebrating real transformative change. Because let's think about what the CSJ has done. There are many people in government who've achieved one thing. Something that maybe has been built or something that maybe has been designed that may even have their name on it. Isn't that exciting? Well, Iain has achieved something quite different. Iain has achieved a transformation of our welfare state so great that even the Labour Party have adopted it. Now that's universal credit, because what he's done, what he showed in the years that he was Secretary of State in charge of welfare, is he showed that when you believe in people, when you trust people, when you recognize human dignity and you recognize the inherent agency of individuals, and you reward that with work, and you support the family, and you empower the education system, guess what you get? You get change, you get opportunity, you get growth. But most importantly, for us, for Conservatives who believe in social justice, who believe in the dignity of every human being, you get something even more precious than that. You get empowerment and dignity with human beings who have otherwise been abandoned. And that is why I am so proud to call Iain a friend, because you have led change where others have spoken about it, and you have a legacy that is visible in not just thousands of lives, but literally millions of lives, because your achievement lives on not only through us, but now through the Labour Party too. Thank you.
So, Dom, I'm going to start with one question. It'll be the same question to every single candidate that comes forward. And you've known about the timing, so it's over to you. The question I want to ask is, what does social justice actually mean to a Conservative, and how do you view that if you were to be leader? Where would it place itself?
So fundamentally, social justice for me is about recognising the dignity of individuals. There are some in the world who say that the job of the government is to be like a charitable donor, to hand out. But that's not right. You can very rapidly see individuals becoming effectively slaves of the state, dependent on the whims of bureaucrats they will never meet and who will never know them, who don't fundamentally care for their own personal lives, for the conditions that affect them, but only for the budget line or for the resources of the state. Now, that's not social justice for me. That's dependency. Social justice for me is about empowerment. So for me, social justice is about education, it's about work, it's about investing in infrastructure, it's about connecting people and communities. And for me, it's the truth of unionism in our name as the Conservative and Unionist Party. It's not just the geographic unionism that links England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, but the generational unionism that connects communities across generations. That's what social justice means for me.
Thank you. As I said earlier on, I want to keep this tight. Can you show if you want to ask a question? I'm going to start with Tim, because I think you want to ask a question. Didn't you say so?
He does now.
What do you say to them? You know, Conservatives are very good at talking about people who have aspiration, the ability to rise up to the ladder. What's your message to people who perhaps, through mental incapacity, physical disability are never really going to fly high. Their life is always going to be pretty much as it is now. What's your message to them?
So, Tim, I think this is a really important question because a lot of people use aspiration as a shorthand for wealth or a shorthand for assets or a shorthand for property. That's not what it means to me. Aspiration, for me, is that aspiration to have the dignity of your place in society. Now, I know many people for whom that aspiration is to have a job that some people would look down on. Well, as Conservatives, we don't look down on any job. We recognise the dignity in all work. And I can tell you, as somebody who has family members who are on the autistic spectrum, for some of them, the aspiration is independent living. For others, the aspiration is work in a supermarket. That may not be the aspiration that we all have for everybody, but it is the correct aspiration and the true aspiration for those that we love in our families to have that dignity of independence. That's aspiration too. All of these things, for me, are aspiration. And I really don't like the crude sort of identification with conservative equals wealth or conservative equals chasing after power or assets. That's not true. It's after dignity. And as a conservative, I recognise the individual dignity of every human being. And what annoys me about socialism, what angers me about socialism, is it confuses that need for support at a time of need with the blocking of people into groups, the identity defining, labelling of people that actually reduces aspiration, not just wealth, but actually the dignity that aspiration is.
Gentleman just there. Can you, by the way, identify yourselves when you ask it and just ask the question? Keep it tight if you can. Are we looking for a microphone for him? Shout it out, you'll be fine. Okay, come here. Could the others of you want to ask a question indicate so I can pick you up quicker?
Hi, thank you. Tom, David Taylor, I'm a councillor over in Havering. In order to prevent people falling into poverty, we need true wraparound care that intervenes early in their life. Yet we have local authorities facing bankruptcy right across the country and cutting back on providing social care. How would a Tom Tugendhat-led Conservative Party ensure that local authorities have what they need to provide that intervention to prevent people entering poverty?
Well, this is, funnily enough, this is an argument that Iain was making in 2012, 2013, something like that, because the truth is that local authorities are very often the organisation, the part of government that is most in touch with this urgent level of support, either with the older members of society or the younger, actually, at all ends of the spectrum. And what we've got to do as Conservatives is we've got to realise that conservatism is built on dignity and dignity is built on trust. And you've got to trust people. Now, that trust doesn't just go to the centre of government, it actually goes throughout government. You need to trust local authorities who have their own elected mandate to have the authority, the responsibility and the accountability of the decisions they make. And you need to make sure that you are trusting individuals to choose the local authorities, the elected representatives that are right for their area. That's what we've got to do. We've got to remember that conservatism is about dignity, but dignity is based on trust. That's how you make sure that the resources are there. Now, I'm not going to pretend it's easy. It's not easy. And the decisions that councils are having to make at borough or district or at county level or at unitary level, obviously, are really, really difficult. But we can see that there are some that are making really important and interesting decisions where they're experimenting with different ways of providing social care, of combining different elements of need, whether it's about putting nurseries with pensioners and seeing how the coalition of that relationship actually empowers both. And this is where we should be seeing devolution work as well. Because the truth is we haven't always seen devolution work as it should. We've seen devolution, it's true, in parts of the United Kingdom, but in other areas, all we've seen is separatism and centralisation. That's what the SNP have introduced to Scotland, for example. That's what Labour have introduced to Wales. They haven't really done devolution. They've done separation. It's not the same thing at all.
There's a lady here, and then I'm going to come back over here. You had your arm up earlier.
Hi, Genevieve Hall-Allen from The Telegraph. Levels of those not working due to long-term sickness and therefore levels of economic inactivity have risen and not fallen despite the end of the lockdowns and the pandemic. And it was something that Rishi Sunak tried to solve. How would you solve it?
Look, I'm afraid I don't have a quick answer for you. There are a series of issues that we need to address. One of the real problems that we see is that levels of young people who are off sick for various different reasons is now at similar levels to what it was for those over the age of 50 a number of years ago. Now that balance is wrong. I'm not saying that those people are wrong to be sick. I'm just saying that our society isn't working right for that to have become the case. And part of this is down to social isolation. Part of it is due to transport costs. Part of it is to do with the investment in infrastructure. But part of it is also to do with the isolation that many of us were introduced to in COVID and the failure to recover from it that has left a lot of people feeling isolated. This is where the cost of such major incidents has been in some ways exaggerated, in some ways undervalued. Because the truth is COVID and the consequences of it are something that we're still living with. And many people who are finding their mental health has been severely affected are living with the effects that were embedded, if you will, during those periods. Now, this is where we need to work together. And one of the things that I'm always struck by is when I was younger, one of the things that doctors used to say if you had a bad back was you have to lie down. One of the things that we need to make sure we're doing with people who are suffering from isolation is helping them to become part of a community. Now, that doesn't mean forcing people back to work instantly, but it does mean helping people to get back to work. And let's be honest, that's where supporting the family comes in. Because the truth is an awful lot of the policies that we are talking about, they can either be done extremely expensively and not as well by the state, or they can be done more sensitively, more lovingly, and let's be honest, more cheaply by families. So supporting families, making sure that we recognise the family in our tax code properly, which we don't currently do, we're an outlier in that, is I think a really important thing to do. And just before anybody says something, let me also be clear on one thing. I said supporting the family, not defining the family. How you define your family is up to you. How we support it is a job for all of us.
Okay. You wanted to ask, can I keep the questions tight too, please, because we'll be running out of time at this rate.
Hi, Ishfaq Hussain from Peterborough, ex-councillor. It was basically whatever a leader says can divide or unite a party and a country. Recently we've seen the riots happening. People like me felt like we're the other, even though my values align with conservative values, my religious beliefs align with that. But we always felt like we're made to feel like we're the other. The last government failed to get a working definition of Islamophobia. Is there something that your government, if you were in power, would do to change that?
Okay. I'll keep this tight as well because
sure. Look, let me be quite clear. My politics is about unity, not about division. And when I talked about unionism, I mean unionism across the whole of the United Kingdom. You know, one of the things I'm proudest of is that I've served alongside many young men and women from all parts of the United Kingdom, from every different religion, race, culture, creed, and all are part of the United Kingdom and part of our great united family. Now, I think that's hugely important and hugely empowering. And it is the job of politicians, I think, to bring people together. It's very, very easy to divide. It's very hard to unite, and our job is to bring people together.
Thank you. There's a lady back here with a hand up. Yep. Can you, again, announce yourself?
My name is Michelle Walton. I'm the Vice Chair of the Corporate Parent Panel at Durham County Council. Durham Council has been working with our children looked after, and the Voice of the Child has told us that they would like us to make care leaving a protected characteristic. Is that something you would consider doing?
Look, I think it's a really interesting idea, and I'm not going to give you, forgive me, I'm not going to give you an immediate answer on it because it's something I'd need to understand better, because there are some people who leave care straight into very sportive environments and others who leave care into more troubled environments. And depending on where you are, I think the risk is that it's too broad a category. And one of the things that I'd like to understand is how you can support people in those moments of transition. Because it is certainly true that one of the things that care leavers often lack is the social capital that goes with a strong family network. And seeing how we can support that, seeing how we can enable that is a really interesting question. I'm not sure, forgive me, but I'm not sure it's all for the state. I think churches, I think community groups, sports clubs can often play a role that the state couldn't play and would never be able to play in providing some of that social capital that allows people to transition out of care and out of that organised environment into the freedom and the dignity of every citizen.
We have another question from this side. Gentleman at the back. say who you are?
Thank you. I'm Jay Chan from Southern Coalview. I actually submitted a question to you in Hastings. Sorry. I spent 2 years in the need improvement school in Southern Coalview. I spent 2 years in the good school. This experience allowed me to meet some of my friends and some of my classmates who failed to live or grew up in a loving environment in family. Some of them does not have a mother, a father, or indeed both parents. Some of them have abusive parents. How is a Tom Tugendhat-led Conservative Party going to tackle the issue of young people not growing up with this care and love and socialization that they need? Thank you.
Well, look, this is where, I mean, there are some things that the state can do and some things the state can't do. One of the things that we can't do and shouldn't do is force people into relationships that aren't working. So let me be clear, that's not what we should be doing. What we should be doing is supporting relationships that are, and sometimes those relationships are with grandparents, sometimes they're with siblings, sometimes they're with uncles or aunts. And that's where we need to be understanding as to what it is to be a family. And that's why I say that our job is to support families, not to define them. Sometimes it'll be two parents, 2 men, 2 women. Sometimes it'll be a mixed parental group. Sometimes it'll be single parents. Sometimes the parent, if you like, may be a sibling or maybe an uncle or aunt. And we need to be supporting each of those communities to make sure we're getting the best results for the individual and helping that individual grow and mature in our community.
On this side, I had a gentleman at the front. Sorry, I'll try and we can squeeze you in at the back. Yeah.
My name's Ed. What does the Tom Tugendhat-led Conservative Party offer that none of the other 3 do in terms of social justice?
Look, that's a very good question, but I'm afraid it's very difficult for me to answer. You'll have to ask them what their views are, and then compare the differences.
We will.
I'm sure you will. Look, I mean, you can see where my values come from, right? They come from the individual dignity of human beings, and forgive me, I'll tell you frankly, I speak as a Roman Catholic. I see the dignity of God in all people. Now, that's my language. You don't have to share that language. I think that you can be an atheist or an agnostic and still see human dignity. But for me, it comes through that Christian interpretation. You'll have to ask the others how it comes.
Yes, I think, did we get... Yes, you were first, I think, gentlemen.
Hi, Joseph Timman from the Manchester Evening News. A lot of people bought into the idea of levelling up in 2019. What do you think went wrong, and how would you approach that issue? What's your sort of offer to the north of England?
So I don't think levelling up is just about the north, frankly. I think levelling up is about helping...
Can I just ask you just to state what you think levelling up is? What it should be, rather than what you think, because I think it's important for the audience to get your view. So what was levelling up? What should it have been, and did we deliver it?
So I can say what it should have been, not what it...
what your view of what levelling up
I mean, every one of our last 3 prime ministers defined it very differently. So what I think it should have been about looking around the community and connecting communities together, making sure disadvantaged communities would connect with other communities. As you know, one of the big challenges that we've had in this country is that there are many people who find it hard to get around, so they end up taking lower paid jobs rather than better paid jobs because the cost, as it were, the physical cost, the friction cost of moving to a job or moving house is too great. That's why building homes is so important for raising the hopes and aspirations of individuals. That's why building transport networks, including train lines to Manchester and beyond, is actually very important. And that's why making sure we're investing in the connections between communities is so important. And so what I'd like to see is I'd like to see that investment recognised for what it is, an investment in the future social capital. Now, one of the problems we've so often had is that if you take a treasury approach to this and you look at an investment of a train line or whatever, you see the investment return as being the ticket prices plus. But let's be honest, the profit of the London Underground is not the tickets of the London Underground, it's London. London doesn't work without the London Underground. You cannot have a city of that scale and size without the Underground, without the transport networks, without the train networks. It doesn't work. And yet to see in Leeds, there's a tram network that's been approved, I think it was in '93, that has still not been built. Well, what's that holding back? It's not just the profit on the ticket prices of the tram networks that's holding back. It's holding back the development of Leeds and the development of the entire community around it. That's what levelling up means to me.
Okay, one last question. 30 seconds to ask, 30 seconds to answer. Gentleman at the back.
Government spending is already 100% of GDP. We're all compassionate. We all want everyone to get looked after. but how are you going to fund it? Shouldn't we have less social spending because we don't have any money? All the councils overspending.
Well, look, I'm not going to be writing a budget for 4 years' time right now, but you're absolutely right that what we've got to do is we've got to make sure that where we're investing in areas where we're actually going to achieve growth. And where we're understanding what the spending is, we've got to make sure that it is tight and accountable. And the truth is, you know, there are some changes we can make that improve productivity and don't improve costs. Look at the health service. Where we have trusted teachers, where we have trusted pupils and we have trusted their parents, we have got more efficient schools, getting better results for roughly similar amounts. In healthcare, we've seen costs rise because we've because we've emphasised the state element of healthcare rather than the element of healthcare that most people touch, which is actually private sector, it's the GPs. But people forget about that. And we need to recognise that actually in most of public life, in most areas of spending, there are actually 4 elements that go into it. The same is true of the NHS. There's the state element. I'm going to finish. There's the state element, the private element, the charity, and most importantly, the family. There you go.
Tom, thank you very much indeed. Well done. Very good. We've got another bottle of water. Have we? Oh, no, it's him. Right. We have a brief pause while one extricates himself and the other is brought in.
The horn playing was fantastic. The hooter
brought in by this lady.
It was, yeah. She'd had enough, so she hounded the horn. Right. Okay, the horn will be sounded in due course, but we need a candidate. Have you got a candidate? Remember, I want to try and pick as many people as possible, so try and avoid the same people every time, but if you have an interesting question, do ask it. Okay, I'll come to you first. There's a couple of seats here if you feel like sitting down, just in the middle here, just in the second row. Do come and sit down. Robert?
Good evening.
Have a seat. You've had the rules explained to you, I think.
So, yes.
Okay, so we have candidate number 2, Robert Jenrick. We're going to do the same again. Robert, you have initially 5 minutes, but it's, you know, the whole 20 minutes is up to you. If you want to just talk, you can. If you want to take questions, you don't have to talk as much. So it's up to you, and the hooter will sound when you have 1 minute to go. And I'll try and be as quick as possible to get others to questions. So, Robert, welcome.
Well, very good, and good evening. I won't speak for long, because I'd much rather answer your questions, listen to your views. I want to say just a few things. Firstly, to pay particular tribute to everyone at CSJ, and of course to you, Iain, for your leadership. And I think it's particularly pertinent because CSJ came forward during our last period in opposition. And it's a reminder to us all that even in dark times, good things can come forward. Imagine how we used that period in opposition under your leadership here and the fantastic team at CSJ. We didn't waste that time. We used it to come forward with new intellectual ideas and give our party purpose again. And that tells me a lot about what we now need to do as a party, to use this enforced period in opposition wisely, to think carefully about what are the enduring values and principles of conservatism. What are the policies that we should stand for? What are the big social and economic challenges facing our country that we as Conservatives want to be standard bearers for tackling? My campaign comes to this day and this moment from a particular standpoint. I think we've just lost our worst ever electoral defeat. And when you're faced with a moment like this, you have a choice. Do you put your fingers in your ears, pretend that nothing has really gone wrong, hope that the electorate will have buyer's remorse and come running back to us? And look, that might happen. This is a very bad Labour government in its first 3 months. But I'm not prepared to take that chance. I want to take the harder course, which is where we concede, we admit that we made mistakes, that we didn't get everything right, which is the hardest thing of all to do in politics, that we didn't deliver the border, the NHS, the economy that we promised. And we set out to change. I stand for change in this leadership election. And I want us to confront the big issues facing our country. And I think that no other organisation, or few other organisations in our party, have such potential to help us on that journey than CSJ. And I have worked with CSJ as a minister for many years. We worked together on tackling rough sleeping, one of the great social ills facing our society, and one where actually I think in government we made a huge amount of difference. Inspired by CSJ, by the initiative that it took, we created the world's most successful homelessness programme, Everyone In, which got 90% of the people in our country who were on the streets off in days during the pandemic, and left a lasting legacy where there were fewer people in that situation. We saw homelessness as much a crisis of addiction and mental health as it was of housing, and helped to change the national conversation. I've seen other very important pieces of work that CSJ has done, and we've seen it just recently with the report you've done on how we can take forward our benefits system and welfare reform. I think welfare reform, which Iain pioneered in opposition and then in government, will be once again one of the most important things we could do as a party in opposition now. Because we've got to find new ways of getting the millions of people who are out of work back into the workplace, into the dignity that comes with work. And just as Iain did in government, in the coalition period, to end the sick note culture that existed under Gordon Brown and Tony Blair, we have to do the same today for new and in some respects more complex challenges as to how we help those people who are off work with mental health back into the workplace. Not to repudiate the work that we've done over 10 years to educate our country and to encourage a more healthy debate about mental health, but to say that it is not in the interests of people or our economy to have so many people languishing at home, out of work, and medicalising normal human experiences. That strikes me as exactly the kind of challenge, complex, sensitive, but incredibly important, that CSJ should be taking forwards, and which we as a party should be leading on in this period in opposition. So that's what the kind of things I want to be dealing with. I've spoken a lot in this leadership contest about immigration, about crime, about how we get our economy growing again, how we build homes for young people and get them on the housing ladder, how we take a more realistic attitude to net zero so we give our country the energy policy it needs to tackle those issues, not to repudiate net zero, but to ensure that we do it in a pragmatic and sensible way. But I'm also someone who believes in conservatism as communitarianism. I believe that there is a higher purpose for conservatism, that we have a responsibility to those less fortunate than ourselves. And I've tried to do that in the different jobs I've done in government, particularly when I was community secretary, to try and make some of COVID more socially just, helping those shielding at home, helping the homeless, helping people who were struggling during that period. I did it as housing secretary when I tried to help young people and those on low incomes, the vulnerable, into safe and secure housing. And I think it's got to be a critical part of ensuring our party meets the challenges of the future and is compassionate in the way it handles them. That's what I want to do if I'm lucky enough to lead the party going forwards. And I'd love to work with you, Iain, with the CSJ, with the wonderful team you have here, and all of your supporters, to create the intellectual ballast that our party and the centre-right will now need to meet this challenge. Thank you for having me here today, and I would love to answer as many of your questions as I can.
I'm going to start with one quick question, and then I'll pick them from the audience, and let's both try and keep brief. For a Conservative, though, what does social justice really mean? What is the key theme that runs through the idea of us, which differentiates us from a sort of leftist Labour government and how they see social justice?
Well, I think at the heart of that is that we see this as not merely about the state. We see this as about us as individuals, as families, as communities, coming together to play our role in tackling social ills. It means, what can I do as a parent and as a son and a grandson to look after people? What can I do as a neighbour to support people? What can we do as a group of individuals? It doesn't always have to be about the state. I think it's also, how can we instill conservative principles like the dignity of work, which is exactly what you did, Iain, when you were Welfare Secretary. It wasn't just about handout culture, it was about how we can help people to have a leg up in life, to have the opportunity to earn more, to take on more hours, to do better for their family. That is what the state should be trying to do wherever we can. The other thing I feel very strongly about, and perhaps this is a product of my roots, I grew up just down the road from here in Wolverhampton, I represent a small town in North Nottinghamshire, is I feel part of the mission of the Conservative Party is to spread opportunity to all parts of our country. London was a very distant place to me when I grew up. I'd probably visited it fewer than 4 or 5 times when I turned 18. Went to the theatre, went on a school trip, virtually nothing else. And that's not unusual. I do trips down to Parliament for my constituents, and many, many times people have never been to London in their lives. Whether it's Disraeli, speaking of one nation, or Boris, talking of levelling up, the Conservative Party has to be a national party. And so I see part of our mission, our social justice mission, is spreading opportunity to everyone across our country, so that a young boy growing up in Wolverhampton to working class parents can have access to just the same opportunities as my children do now, growing up in a family of 2 parents who have been to university, who have had professional lives, have privilege and opportunity. And I think we have to reimagine that. Whether we call it levelling up or something entirely new, we mustn't allow this agenda to slip through our fingers. I want the party to be a national party and to be setting out to spread opportunity to everyone in all parts of our country.
Very good. Right, we have some questions. I'm going to start on the right, come back to the left if I can. There's a hand definitely at the back there. Is that hand I can see? Is that? Yes? Far away. Again, state who you are and any other particulars. With limitations.
I'll just do my name. So I'm Michelle Walton, and I'm the Vice Chair of the Corporate Parent Panel at County Durham Council. Through the Voice of the Child and the work that we've done with our children looked after, one thing that they've come back to us with is they'd like us to make care leaving a protected characteristic. Obviously, we know that they go through lots of things that are not their fault, but they feel it would help them in their future. Is this something you could support?
Well, I don't know if I would make it a protected characteristic in a legal sense, but I certainly think that we should give as much support as we possibly can to care leavers. And it's something that I've been personally involved in. I'm involved in a charity in my own constituency which does this, that tries to find secure housing for care leavers, tries to find jobs and support for them. And we need to do far more of that across the country. You know, a very large proportion of those people sleeping rough on our streets are people who work through the care system. And that is, in a sense, a stain on all of us. It's a failure of the British state, isn't it, that we look after people so poorly that they don't have access to the opportunities that they should. And if there are ways in which our party can think through that carefully and make that pathway more successful, we absolutely should do.
Gentleman over here. Microphone right down the front.
Hi, I'm Jonathan. I'm chair of Birmingham Health Partners. In this city, we have some very high levels of childhood obesity. What would you do to reduce childhood obesity? And it's worth saying childhood obesity then foreshadows all sorts of bad outcomes later in life.
Well, a very good question. I've been asked about slimming down a lot, actually, in the last few months, more than I would like, which is not to trivialise the issue. But I am not in favour of the nanny state. And I don't mean that that sounds like a simplistic thing to say, but I'm not in favour of sugar taxes and ways of telling people and parents how to live their lives and bring up their children. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be working hard to try to educate people, to support them, to encourage people to lead healthier lives. But I'd much rather put our emphasis on that than what I suspect the Labour Party is about to do from what we read in the papers, which is to make it even harder for people to purchase things, to have simple pleasures in life. So that is my attitude. But I appreciate that obesity is a major challenge facing our country, both childhood and adult obesity. It's something we should be trying to find ways of resolving. But I think a conservative way into that is through education, through guidance, rather than telling people how to live their lives.
On this side again, I'm over here. Who has their hand up first? Oh yes, I can't resist you, Miriam.
Thank you. Miriam Cates. You mentioned the working class boy from Wolverhampton. There is such a crisis in status and confidence and worth in young working class men in this country. You can see that in crime, in education. They're taught at school that the problem is toxic masculinity. If you are elected leader, what will you do to restore that status and respect to young poor men?
I think this is one of the biggest questions, isn't it? And you, Miriam, have been amongst the many crusades that you fought. This has been one that you've been incredibly eloquent on. And actually that's not insignificant, because part of the issue is just us talking about it, isn't it? Why do so few politicians speak about this compared to all the other issues in our politics? It is very important that we put the issues of young working class boys on a similar parity of esteem to other communities and groups in our society. When I was first elected Member of Parliament in Newark, which is a white working class town in North Nottinghamshire, I was struck by the poverty of ambition there amongst so many people. I don't mean my constituents, I mean the local education authority, some of the head teachers. We had 3 failing secondary schools, and I was told, well, why are you getting involved in this? These are just bog standard schools. This is a bog standard town. And I refused to accept that. And I spent probably the first 2 years of my time in Parliament working hard to resolve it. I founded a free school in Newark, which set out specifically to answer this question. It said all the middle class parents are going to grammar schools in Lincolnshire. How can we create a school which is not academically selective, but in every other respect has all the same benefits and enables young people who don't have those opportunities in Newark to get the same quality of education? It's now an outstanding school. And it means that a white working class boy or girl in Newark can get the access to the first class education that they deserve. So I don't have all the answers, but I think we should be talking about it fearlessly, not be put off by those people who diminish it as an issue. And we should see ourselves as warriors on this issue, trying to find in our own communities, our own constituencies and across the country, practical ways of raising opportunity and aspiration for those young people.
Okay, now we had, I'm going to pick 2 people at the back who are trying to catch my attention. Gentleman there, and there was another one over here, gentleman there with the beard. So if I run those 2 questions together and you try and deal with them too, and how can I say?
Telling me to have shorter answers. It's not the fault of the questioner, it's the fault of the answer.
Yeah, that goes for the questioner too, by the way.
I'll be quick. Hi, Robert. Councillor David Taylor from Romford. You've recently visited Romford, and it's a town in Havering where we've got 300 families living in bed and breakfasts and hotels. We're here talking about social justice. How will you deliver justice for these families that are living in temporary accommodation? Thank you.
Yep.
Hello, Aaron Jacob. I stood for Parliament in Sheffield, Brightside and Hillsborough in the general election just gone. How can we get those who are currently economically inactive back into the labour force?
Well, two very good questions. I mean, the second question is one that the CSJ is intimately involved in already. I think we did good work under Mel Stride in the final months of the government, but there's clearly a great deal more that we can do now in opposition to think through these challenges, to urge and persuade the government to take them forward. Because incidentally, my view of opposition is that we should try to be a mature opposition, and there are some questions which are of such importance to the country where we shouldn't just be opposing for opposing's sake, but we should be coming up with good ideas and then trying to persuade the government to take them forward. And issues of social justice, welfare reform, strike me as exactly in that category. But if there are tax incentives or other ways of persuading people back into the workplace, we definitely should. The area I've spent the most personal time thinking through is this challenge of how we can get people who are currently off work sick with mental health back into the workplace. And that strikes me as probably the most complex, the most sensitive, but also probably the most important question that we're facing right now in the welfare system. On the question that you asked, sir, from Romford, well, I suppose of almost all the parliamentary party, I'd like to think that I have spent the most time fighting the case for more homes to be built in this country. And I still feel that very strongly. It is a moral question. We should get people into safe, secure, decent accommodation. I didn't have a lot of money when I was a child. My mum and dad, they were not poor, but they started a small business, they quit their jobs, money was tight. What we had was our home, and home was everything to us. It was the absolute bastion, the citadel, it's what we had. We loved our home. What little money we had was poured into our home, the garden, doing it up, you name it. I understand the value of having a home. I'm a parent of 3 children. Our home means a lot to me. What I want to do is ensure every family in this country has safe and secure housing. That means as our party, we have to ask tough and searching questions to ourselves. How do we get hundreds of thousands of more homes built in this country? Of course, we've got to protect the countryside. Of course, we've got to ensure that local people have their say. But if we believe in the moral mission of people having good quality housing of their own, we've got to get out there and build more homes. And so of the many issues I want our party to take forwards in the years ahead, one of them is housing. Build more homes. Build it to create jobs, create economic growth in our country, help young professionals onto the housing ladder, but also to help exactly the people you refer to, the most vulnerable in society, to get the housing that they deserve for them and their children. Let's make this part of the moral mission of our party going forwards.
Okay. You've got 1 minute. You've got 5 seconds to ask your question, the gentleman here, and you have just a little bit longer to answer it, but not long.
Very quick. My name is Daniel. I work for the German newspaper Taz. Does Britain have a role to play in global social justice?
Oh, what's a shame.
You were not saved by the horn.
I still have to answer it.
You have 1 minute to answer that.
Look, yes, it obviously does. Look, we are a big-hearted country that has had an important role in the world, will have an important role in the future. I want us to continue that. I want us, for example, to play a role in helping people in genuine need to come to our country. You know, I was the first member of parliament to house Ukrainian refugees. You know, I think it's very important that we continue to live up to our role in the world. It's a source of pride that we issued more humanitarian visas in the last 5 years than any other government in the history of our country. 500,000 people have come to our country from Hong Kong, Syria, Ukraine, Afghanistan to seek sanctuary. We should be proud of that. Don't let the left tell you that we are mean-spirited because we also care about clamping down on illegal migration. We've done a lot for people. That's incredibly important. I want that to continue. I do think, however, that the first duty of the British government is our own people, and that we should be particularly careful about supporting our own people. I don't think it's sensible that we're spending, as Ed Miliband has just said, £11 billion a year on climate aid when we've got those families that we just heard about in Romford living in B&B accommodation. That is not right. Let's look after our own people first. As leader of our party, if I was lucky enough to be our Prime Minister, I'd always put the interests of the British people first. That has to be what the Conservatives believe in.
Robert, thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thanks, Ian. Very nice
Thank you,
to
well
see
done.
you. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, everyone. Very nice to see you.
I don't think he drank that, actually. Right, it's been quite revealing, all of this, isn't it? Yeah. Who's next? It's Kemi, is it? Okay.
I've got to leave in 10 minutes.
I'll cut it down to 3.
I'm doing Times Radio on this thing, actually.
Oh, eh?
I'm not leaving.
Kemi. Have a seat.
Thank you.
So, Kemi, the rules as have been established to you, and everyone's been on them. You have 20 minutes, some opening remarks. How long you take on those is your choice. After that, it's all questions, and we'll be quite tight on the timings at the end. So, away.
Thank you. Thank you. And good evening, everyone. This is the first time that I've done a hustings after a party. So please forgive me in case I say something that you might find unusual. That is what has been happening at this conference. And I am the candidate who is trying to make sure that people start to see conservatism as mainstream again. We have become conservatives who are hiding who we are. We don't talk about our authenticity. And that is what my Renewal 2030 campaign is about. It is about becoming more confident about what we believe in. And that includes first principles. Policy is important, but policy that is not rooted in principle does not resonate with the public. So what are my principles? I gave a campaign speech a month ago where I talked about family, personal responsibility, and citizenship. And I think those first two principles are very key to the work that the CSJ does. Family is the most important thing to me. My life would have no meaning without my family, without my husband, children, my siblings. I grew up in a big family. I was one of 3, but my parents were one of 8 and one of 9. I have about 40, 50 cousins. And I have seen the spectrum of great successes to great failures within my family. And I have seen what a difference parents can make to their children's lives. I've seen what happens when some parents walk away and how that can be so destructive. I have family members who walked down the pathway of addiction. Some survived, others didn't. And I think that there is a role for Conservatives to play in society to talk about these things. We don't talk enough about these things. We act as if sometimes they are unfashionable. But if we allow other people to define what is fashionable and what we're allowed to talk about, society will keep spiraling downwards. My second principle is personal responsibility. I am somebody who believes that most of what happens to us, we have the power to control. We can't control everything. But relying on the state and relying on the government does not necessarily make things better. I think that the state has actually crowded out a lot of community involvement, a lot of the little platoons that actually have made this country great, and we need to champion them. We are the only party that I think will do this without asking for more state money, without asking for more government regulations, but will actually talk about what works. I think that government has a lot to learn about what works, from charities, from communities, from all of those people who are out there on the front line, who see the problems, and not just sitting in Whitehall writing lots of pamphlets. Although I do have a very good pamphlet out this evening called Conservatism in Crisis, so please do look it up. But I'm pleased to be speaking to all of you this evening, because I think that there is an opportunity to actually broaden the debate beyond the narrow confines we've been talking about most of the conference. Immigration, tax, of course, these are things that are important. But we as Conservatives are a broad church, and there is actually quite a lot that we can do, that we can talk about, that we can bring in, that will make this country better. Thank you.
Now, Kemi, I'm asking this question to every single one. The rest are all random questions. The question I really want to ask you, which I've asked the others, is when it comes to the concept of social justice, How do you think, what is that really all about when it comes to conservative views of society? What do we think social justice is about, as opposed to maybe what the left sees it as maybe largesse?
So the left has captured the phrase social justice, and we need to reclaim it. They use social justice to smuggle in socialism. We need to make sure that our social justice is about reducing disadvantage, about opportunity, about making sure that everybody has a great chance in life. That, I think, is the core difference. There are many disagreements that we may have on exactly how to do that, but I think we should have a healthy debate within the Conservative Party. For me, social justice is about making sure that people have the tools to fix their lives. It's about seeing what is broken and making sure that we don't just leave it and assume that the market will take care of it. I'm somebody who believes very much in the market, but not everything is a market. And if you try and make things that are a market, make things that aren't a market, they will fail. It's about the right tools and the right solutions. And I think that there is a place for communities, for charities, for those social entrepreneurs who just want to make society better.
Right. Okay, I'll start on the left this time. Gentleman here with his hand up. Yeah, at the back, if you'd like to ask your question. We've got a microphone for him quickly.
Tax allowances in marriage. Sorry, do you want me to repeat that? Sorry.
We got it.
You got
Get
it.
the end of it. Over to you, Kemi.
So, should we reclaim the mantle as the party of the family? I don't think we ever really lost that mantle. Liberal Democrats are not the party of the family. Labour is not the party of the family. The Greens aren't. And Reform certainly isn't. It's up to us to do this. But we have to make sure that we don't allow people to caricature us. One of the things that I find is if you start talking about conservative values, people immediately rush to conclusions and say, oh, what you're saying is that this is the only kind of family that's proper, or what you're saying is that women shouldn't go out to work, and so on and so forth. So one of the first things that we need to do, if we are going to be the party of the family, is confidently defend our values and explain why family is important. Take prisons, for example. You look at the prison population, and almost everyone in there has come from a family that has not worked out, a broken family or a family that was not strong or stable. It is amazing the statistics of men in prison who grew up without having their fathers there. So we need to start talking about those things and not feel shy and feel like, well, it's not cool to say these things, because if we don't say it, nobody will. You asked about policy. I'm not starting with policy right now, because I think when we start with policy, we end up going down rabbit holes without anchoring ourselves in the principles. The policy will come later. But where we are right now as a party is at a crossroads. We may do well and come back, or we may be extinguished. We need to make sure that the latter does not happen. And that means starting from first principles, making sure that we can bring each other together, that we are all singing from the same hymn sheet, and then we can put the policies, like maybe transferable allowances, like policies on childcare, and so on. But I'm not convinced that policy alone matters. Policy alone will do it. Culture also matters. And we need to talk about what kind of culture we are creating for young people in particular that's going to make them feel rooted and actually feel a sense of belonging in their communities, which is something that I think is disappearing.
Question from this side. Let's see. Gentleman here, I think I haven't had you. Yep, no, your hand in there. That's one.
Adam El-Bazi from Hammersmith and Chiswick. In 2010, there were 60,000 food bank parcels that were handed out, and now it's well over 3 million. So what do you think has caused this? Is it a symptom of a failure of social justice in the UK, and how can you bring that number down?
I think there are many things that have led to those figures rising. There are things that perhaps decades ago would just have been done by the church, and nobody was collecting the statistics. I remember the church being a huge institution for delivering social justice in a way that I don't see that much of in communities now. But something else is happening, and that is that we are becoming poorer as a society. We don't notice it because the statistics show that we are growing, albeit quite slowly, low growth. And because actually, before things get pretty bad, it takes a while. But you look at the cost of living crisis, which is happening all over the world. It's not just here. And you look at things like energy costs rising, the jobs disappearing, the productive economy just slowing down, productivity being extremely low. All of those things are going to have an impact, and they will hit those who are most vulnerable before those of us who are doing okay or who are doing very well. And I think that all of those things can explain that. And what we do in order to resolve this needs to be very smart, very clever. We can't allow people to feel that the government can fix everything, because it cannot. But we also don't want people to think that the government isn't doing anything, and therefore that's why there's a rise in food banks. And food bank parcels. How we tackle this is going to require a lot of compassion, a lot of care, and a lot of thought. But there are many things that are responsible for those statistics, and it's important that we look at the underlying reasons rather than pick one thing and then rush to conclusions.
This side, anybody particularly want to ask a question? Have I asked? I think I asked you earlier, didn't I? Yeah, okay, well, hand down for a second. Lady here. You've got to be a bit more, a little more...
My name is Comfort Ronke from Basildon and Toro Council. My question is this. If you are asked to give a 60-second speech deck about a clear-cut difference between the Reform and the Conservative, what would that be? Because we need to win 4 million votes back from the Reform.
You got the brief. Well done. Right. Over to you.
There are many differences between us and Reform. Reform is aping us. Reform is harking back to a memory of conservatism that is not for the future, but the past. We are the only ones who can help the future. And that is because we are the ones who are serious. Reform makes promises, doesn't know how it's going to deliver them. We lost our way when we were doing that, and we are out of government because we made promises and didn't keep them. That's what Reform is doing. We have been in government, we understand the issues, we know that the solutions are not easy. Reform is offering easy solutions. We are offering the truth. And when we do that, we will resonate more with the public. But we need to make sure that we don't look like we're copying Reform. People can spot a copy, they can spot something that is not authentic. What we can do is be confident conservatives. Reform only exists because we created a vacuum for them. We need to make sure that we fill that vacuum. And it isn't about showing just how right-wing we can be. I don't think politics is as simple as that anymore. It's not just about left or right. I tell people it's also about right or wrong. And I think we are right, and Reform is wrong.
Very good. On this side, I had a gentleman just here at the front. I'll come back. Microphone coming.
What do you think about a policy that's being pursued in Canada or Alaska, like a universal basic income scheme?
I don't think universal basic income is a good idea. I think it sounds like a good idea, but it is an idea that is of the left and which I think does not necessarily understand how the economy works. We have to look at human behavior, not just theory. If we had universal basic income, there are a lot of people who simply would not go out to work. And I think work is one of those things that gives people dignity. It gives people a network. It increases their social interactions. They learn more. Having people who don't go to work will create even more problems. A universal basic income also assumes that the money is just there. The money is not just there. People have to go out and work for it. If people are getting money without doing anything, who is working to produce that? So I don't think universal basic income is a good idea. I think it sounds like a nice idea, but Conservatives need to make sure that we are doing what works, not just what sounds nice. And UBI, as it's called, is only starting out in those places. I suspect it's going to fail. I know that there are some places where it's already been withdrawn. That's not where I would start if I was looking at policies for the future. Thank you.
Good. On this side now, unless there's somebody in the middle here. Normally a Liberal Democrat, but yeah. I'll take the gentleman here, yeah. You're not quite in the middle, on the left.
Vijay Srao from High Wycombe. Where do you see the danger in getting social justice wrong? Because in the 1930s in Germany, it failed and you ended up with the Holocaust, and now in Germany you've got the alternative for Deutschland. How do you avoid extremes of left and right?
So, Avoiding extremes of left and right is about making sure that we are not pandering just to passions and just to emotions. It is about making sure that we also have reason. And one of the things that I believe, I said it in my maiden speech, that we are leaving the age of reason and we are moving into the age of emotion. This is amplified by things like social media, where so many of us are in our echo chambers. I mean, to give you an example, I don't see anything on my Twitter feed now that doesn't have my name in it, because clearly I've been clicking on things that are mentioning me, and Twitter's worked out that this person likes reading about Kemi Badenoch, and that is all that is coming to me. But you extrapolate that, and you find out that people are just not understanding what other people's lives are like. We are losing touch with people who are different from us. Society is becoming more polarized, and that is how extremes crop up. We need to try and bring people together. That is why I am so against the politics of group identities and identity politics. I just think it is very dangerous. Once you encourage people to see difference, they start retreating into groups, they start competing. Oh, why do these people have this? Why don't we have that? Oh, they've got a statue here, should we get a statue? They've got a day, should we get a day? And so on. And I think it creates division. If we want to stop extremes from forming, we need to let people see the identity they share together rather than the differences. It is the emphasizing differences that led to atrocities like the Holocaust, and I see a lot of people on the left talking about difference as if it's a good thing and trying to promote it, but I think that way will only lead to chaos for our society.
Okay, well done. On this side, I'm going to come down a bit further because otherwise you'll dominate the questions. Gentleman just here, go on. Microphone coming in your direction.
Thank you. Toby Garrett from Chingford and Woodford Green.
What can I say? This is a planted question, but, and I'll answer this one, don't worry.
From having reading the CSJ's fabulous suspending reality report on severely absent and absent children from our education system, which was exacerbated from COVID, I was just wondering, I know you're not, so you said first principles rather than policies, but how would you address severely absent and absent children? I used to work in alternative provision during the pandemic, and it was absolutely horrific. You know, not necessarily principles or policies, but how would you address that?
So I don't have a complete answer to that, but we should start off, whenever there's a problem, we should start off with exactly what has happened and why it has happened. So I'm an engineer, and that is how I approach everything. I don't rush to an offer. And there was a cohort of children who just disappeared from school. And COVID obviously masked that initially, and we have seen the huge impact that this has had. We need to find out who these children are. We know they're missing, so we must know who they were initially. We need to find out who they are. We need to look into what kind of families they have. Perhaps they're being homeschooled, in which case, fine. Perhaps they've actually just gone out to the state sector elsewhere. But being able to keep track of what's happening to children is something that is absolutely important. But we also need to care. I think if the state is distant, which it often will be, communities need to step in. If families are isolated, this is more likely to happen. So making sure that we do not have family isolation is important. Making sure that teachers are rooted in their communities, as they often are, but in many cases are not, and making sure that they care. The people who look after children need to be people who care and are not just doing it for a job. When a teacher cares, they start to do more than if they're doing it for the money. And if we have people who are doing this from the heart, for their values, for their communities, we will be able to capture a lot of people like that, who somebody in central London working at the Department for Education is very likely going to miss.
Very good. Before I do, there's a very good paper on this from the CSJ, Two Nations and United Nations, worth reading, with a lot of work done on it. And Martin Ivans, who's over here, was being the brilliant chairman of that, so I want to thank you for that particularly. Right, over on the left here again. Yes, we haven't had one from you.
Hi, Kemi. Can you hear me? I'm Dr. Priya Vimani from Two Cities, London, and I work extensively with women and children. And while we are the party of aspiration and we believe in providing equal opportunity, which is really the cornerstone of what we're posited on. My work shows that there are people, individuals, children, where I'm seeing an inexorable declension in mental health to such an extent that they aren't even able to aspire or to take advantage of any opportunity offered. And you just mentioned in your opening remarks that you believed in providing tools via which individuals and families can fix themselves. What are the tools you think we can provide to such people? And the numbers, as I said, are just increasing exponentially. And as Thatcher said, it's not society, but it's really the individual and the family. And I see the fracture there becoming so palpable. Thank you.
It's a really good question. And the mental health crisis that we've been facing in the country is something that a lot of people talk about, but I don't think we've really got to the roots of. It is not a function of income. Many of the people with the most severe mental health crises actually live very comfortable lifestyles. Some people call it affluenza, that it's just not being able to feel like a need to do anything that's actually very bad for the human spirit, that we all need to have a little bit of adversity to help us cope, and those who don't have any actually do badly. I think that overall in society we're losing a lot of resilience, and that's something that I want us to do a bit more of. Talking about resilience, not just nationally or at security level, but personally. I see a lot of people coming into the workplace who need a comfort blanket around them. They are so unused to anything that makes them uncomfortable. They are running to HR every time they have a disagreement with some of their colleagues, those of us who are older having to step in. And it's clear that resilience, mental resilience, is dropping quickly. Some of this, I think, is happening because society is fragmenting. I can see it even in my own family. My children don't like watching TV. This is extraordinary to me. TV was the biggest treat. But for them, it's having to share a big screen with other people. They want their own personal devices. They want their own thing that they don't have to share with others. But they are, in doing so, they are missing out on a lot of experiences, negotiating with others, working and, trying to get outcomes together, sharing. All of these things are getting harder and harder to do. You can be in a house, you can work there, order food in, never interact with other people in society. And I think that COVID showed that people not being able to see each other actually reduced a lot of mental resilience. So some of the tools we can bring in can be things like, is that for me?
That's your 1 minute.
That's my 1 minute. Really? When did we have a 1 minute time limit?
You got the briefing.
Okay, but bringing people together, providing that resilience. We do need some more support, I think, from the states, whether it's the NHS or other provisions. But there's something going on that we need to examine a little bit more, and hopefully that will fix things.
The 1 minute, by the way, was just that you had a minute to the end of the 20 minutes.
Okay, sorry, I forgot to read the end.
Don't worry. Kemi, that's been very good. Thank you very much indeed. I hope we'll all show our appreciation of Kemi. Well done. Well done. Well done. Right, and we've got our fourth candidate. Is our fourth candidate with us?
He's doing Peston. He's on his way.
He's doing Peston?
Yes. But he's on his way. So, extemporise for a minute or two.
Okay, how long is that going to take him?
I can't. Ask Robert Peston that. He'll be here.
Well, we might start this, and then he can fill in at the end. Okay, well, you can talk amongst yourselves for a while because we're just waiting. There's a slight crossover between two interviews. So we won't pass judgment.
Can we ask you questions?
Ask away. Go on, then ask me a question.
You haven't endorsed anyone.
I haven't endorsed anybody.
It looked like a couple of them were vying for your endorsement.
I hope more than a couple. What can I say? I haven't endorsed anybody because I made my mind up. So I'm not leaning towards anybody, actually. I try very hard to sit upright. And I will wait for the moment critique when I make a decision about it. But there's some good candidates. I'm not sure. It's when the mood, when you suddenly go, that's it, I've got it. This is very helpful, by the way. I find this probably the most helpful of all the conversations we've had about puerile politics. We're actually asking some serious questions, and they're having to answer them. A very good question of yours, for example. Very good question. I mean, the mental health issue is a very big deal, and we need to ask serious questions about why is this generation now suffering. Basically, 60% of all mental health claims are anxiety and depression. And what's inducing this scale of anxiety? Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, it'd be interesting. I have a view about this, which the CSJ's touched on, but my view is this. Yeah, my view on this is very simple. It's simple, but it I think has a heart of it. We are now, for all our communications, modern technology and everything else, we're living more isolated lives than we've lived probably at almost any period in the developed world. So families no longer talk to each other because they head to their rooms. And when they don't really meet for dinner because they get takeouts, etc. They disappear off. They watch their channel. They do this. They do that. So in a sense, I used to, quite right, one screen. You had a family sitting down to it. I'll come back to this in a second. Very good, James. Come on in.
Iain, I am so
Very good to see you. No, don't worry. We understand that. You've got everyone's face the same, which is you have 20 minutes.
Right.
How you take that time to say your opening remarks is up to you, and then it's questions, but we will be quite strict on the 20-minute final declaration. There'll be a little horn, gives you 1 minute, and that's it. James, welcome.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes.
I try and keep a straight face fast.
Yeah, well, you've only got 1 minute to do that afterwards. So, James, welcome. Over to you.
Thank you. Look, I'm not going to speak for very long because I want to give myself, or rather I want to give you the maximum amount of time to quiz me. Many of you won't necessarily know this, but I was one of the first subscribers to the CSJ. I checked my bank account. I let my subscription lapse. I feel a little bit bad about that. But I recognised, and I've said this to his face, so I don't mind saying it behind his back. I think the work that Iain did when he stepped down from leader of the party, looking at what a conservative message should be for people whose lives need transformation, I think was absolutely key. It was a real turning point in our party's history. And I think that underpinned some really important work, underpinned the principle that we need to help and support and liberate people to live their best lives. I think the introduction of universal credit was a game changer, and the fact the Labour Party have criticised much of what we did in government, but they've gone a bit quiet on criticising that, is really telling. I think it was one of the unsung victories of the COVID era. I think it kept livelihoods, it kept families together, it kept food on the table and roofs over people's houses, roof over people's heads, in a way that went strangely, I think, unremarked. And yet it was a game changer. So I've always believed, you look back through the long arc of the party's history, we have always been a party that has done incredibly pro-social things. We took children out of factories and put them into schools. We were instrumental in the abolition of the international slave trade. We have been a party that liberates. And if we get back into the habit of being a party that liberates rather constrains, been a party that supports rather than smothers, I think that will do us huge favours as we look to future elections. So this is an important agenda, and it's one that we really need to reignite, put afterburners on, really promote if we want to get ourselves elected once again. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. So I always start to everybody with one simple question at the beginning. It's the same to all of you, so there's no favour on this one. And the question I want to ask you is, social justice is bandied around in Labour and other parties, etc. But for you, what does a belief from a conservative standpoint What belief do you take from that? What does it actually mean for Conservatives to believe in social justice?
Well, I think social justice in a Conservative context is about not displacing the more natural architecture or the more natural scaffolding of society. I think there is a well-intentioned but fundamentally erroneous desire in left-wing politics to step in and to support. But often what we see when they do it is they end up displacing the better and more natural frameworks. So things like the family. We are being told over and over again now that social services are better placed to understand the needs of a child than the child's parents. That teachers are better able to understand the needs of the child than their parents. We have this weird situation where we disincentivize extended families from looking after children within that family context, but we're now subsidizing private sector nurseries. And I have no problem with private sector nurseries, but we're now taxing working mums to subsidize private sector nurseries because we've made it almost impossible for families to look after their own extended families' children. And it's well-intentioned, but it's fundamentally wrong. So for me, in a Conservative context, it's about providing the opportunity and support for natural scaffolding and architecture within society to do its thing, spotting where there are gaps and failures, because there always will be, stepping in when and only when needed, for only as much as needed, and then trying to repair the scaffolding so we can exit rather than permanently displace things like family and neighbourhoods and communities. That's for me. Look, it's a personal definition. It might not accord with anything anyone else believes, but that's what I think.
Well, that's why you're here. We want to hear what you think rather than anything else. So thank you very much. Right, over to the questions from the hall. So I'm going to start again on the right this time, because we did the left last time. Okay, you were first up with your hand. Don't worry, I'll come back to you. You've been very resilient.
Oliver Lyce at Richmond Park. It's no secret that for many young people, a university education does not offer value for money and can leave students burdened with debt. What roles do you envision for the state and the market in the provision of alternate higher education pathways? Thank you very much.
Oh, cracking question. In my glorious 9 weeks as Secretary of State for Education, not the shortest serving Secretary of State for Education. Ha ha ha. Not even the second shortest serving Secretary of State for Education. But in my glorious 9 weeks, one of the things I started pushing the department on, of course I didn't progress it anywhere near as much as I would want, was about alternative pathways, credible alternative pathways. I'll give you an example. Iain and I share something. We went to an in-house training college, a non-degree awarding in-house training college, which carries almost as much social status as any Oxbridge college. And you might think, well, what's that? Because we both went to the Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst. Not a university, doesn't award degrees. It's an in-house training college. In-house training college prepares you for one job and one job alone. That should be quite a low status institution, but because posh boys and girls traditionally have gone there, it is high status. So there is nothing inherent about a degree that makes it socially high status if we choose to give other important things status. And we should have genuine parity between vocational training and academic training. And the final point I made, and I confronted my Department of Education officials with this, and I will give this to you to mull over for a second or two. When is a vocational degree not a vocational degree? When it's a degree in medicine. Because when people train to be doctors, we think of that as a high status academic degree. It is a vocational degree. It has industrial placement. It is linked to an employer. It is a very hands-on degree. But again, because traditionally posh boys and girls went to study that, we give it this perhaps artificial higher status. If we can raise the status of vocational training, people can make genuine choices for the right pathway for them, rather than all being herded down the same narrow and often really inappropriate education pathway.
Very good. Questions on the left. Let me just see who haven't asked. I just want a gentleman here, and I'll come back in due course.
I'm John. I'm from Devisers.
Yes. My
There,
family's from Pole Shop.
you did mention. Currently, there are about 150,000 children in England who are homeless, and that figure has risen in recent years. What's a Conservative response to this?
Look, without knowing the drivers and composition of that group of children, it's really difficult to know specifically. What we have seen, of course, we know often what are the general drivers of homelessness. Addiction is often a big one, not necessarily children themselves, but their parents or their guardians. We know that again, it goes back to some of those that social architecture, that scaffolding that I was talking about earlier. That old African saying, it takes a village to raise a child. So if your immediate family is struggling, but you have another concentric circle of family support, you're less likely for that child to find themselves homeless. And if you've got concentric circles of support, it's not a guaranteed safety net, but it means it's less likely that that child, their siblings, their parents will fall as far or as fast. So whilst it might not be the complete solution, let's find ways of rebuilding that social scaffolding, that social architecture around the child. And some of it, again, is about having the courage to do enough, but not always trying to do everything, because it's very easy to start displacing that social scaffolding. And I think whilst that is often well-intentioned, it can be really counterproductive, in some cases really genuinely dangerous. But as I say, without knowing a bit more detail, I wouldn't want to go too far down that route.
So on this side, okay, go on then.
Hi, I'm Michelle Walton. I'm the Vice Chair of the Corporate Parent Panel at Durham County Council. We do a lot of work with our children looked after, and one of the things that have come through as the voice of the child is for the children in care, once they've left care, for care leaving to become a protected characteristic. Is this something you could support?
Look, I think there is quite a strong argument for something like that. I don't know whether these figures are still accurate, but when I was doing youth policy for Boris at City Hall when he was Mayor of London, the statistic that was being kicked around was a looked after child was more likely to go to prison than to university. I don't know if that's still the case, but even if it isn't still exactly the case, it's still a horrifying statistic. So we do need to recognise that incredible disruption in the early life of a person is something that they will probably carry with them for the rest of their lives. Exactly how that would manifest itself in public policy terms is something, again, I would want to look at. And I know that when you're at an event like this, particularly during a leadership campaign, you always want to give like very punchy, absolutist, black and white answers. But I think with the kind of issues that you and we think about with the CSJ, thoughtfulness and calmness is the real value of what we can add to this. And the only reason that I hold back a little bit is because what I wouldn't want to do is then create a situation where that is carried through life like an albatross around the neck. But we have to be honest. Looked after children's life chances are massively, massively hampered, often through no fault of their own, and that's something that we should look to do something about.
Right, so wait a minute, just let me check. There was, I'll take two here on this side. There's one here certainly, and I'll pick the other one in a second. Sorry. I'll run them together too, by the way. So if you can be brief with your question, and then...
Joseph Timon from the Manchester Evening News. What went wrong with levelling up, and how will you approach that issue?
The gentleman, yeah, lady there again. Sorry. Oh, sorry. No, I haven't asked you, have I? No. Yeah. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Yeah.
Hello. I'll be short and sweet. Sorry, my name's Natalie. I'm the DCM of Bedford and Kempston Conservatives. Lovely to see you, Mr. Cleverley. I'm very concerned about knife crime amongst our young people. Young people are killing each other. There is a serious epidemic. And I just want to know, if you were leader, how would you address this? Thank you.
So 2 questions. One is obviously levelling up. He says, what happened? I'd have to say, what was it? And the other one is knife crime.
Yeah, look. So levelling up is absolutely the right philosophy. It is the recognition that certain parts of the country have, I'm not going to say unfair advantages, but perhaps first mover advantage. We're not a physically big country, and London dominates. And I'm conscious that there is a perception that London's success is bought at the price of London's success is a lack of success in other parts of the country. I don't totally subscribe to that, but I understand why that frustration exists. And you don't have to travel very far on a train out of London before you hit areas of real deprivation. And the distinction between London and other parts of the country are massive, and we need to do something about that. If I was going to be critical of it, I think we went in a tax and subsidise direction for levelling up, and that can get you away, and it's a quick fix, but it's not the ultimate solution. I look at what Ben Houchin is doing on the Tees Valley. He's created an environment where there is less regulation, less red tape, lighter touch regulation, lower taxation environment, and the international investment is flooding in. Something in the region of 20,000 additional jobs that are going to be created. A green tech environment doing carbon capture and storage, a really sustainable and future-focused industry for the area, and it is transformational. Now, not every part of the country will have carbon capture and storage opportunities, but every part of the country should and could have something that they own as their agenda, driving jobs, driving growth, recreating the social glue that comes with collective industry that many parts of the country, whether it's coal mining in South Wales or in Derbyshire or in Nottinghamshire, whether it's shipbuilding in the northeast, motor manufacturing in the West Midlands. There's industries that created social glue. When those industries went, so went the social glue. If we could replace that with new future tech industries, boom, hey presto, social glue comes back, and a lot of the things that a government had to do to intervene might actually be taken off our plate. Less government doing more stuff, a better government doing less stuff, but doing it really, really well. Knife crime. Again, I'm going to lean on my experience when I was in City Hall in London. That youth portfolio had a big element of crime prevention, particularly violent crime prevention. And when we were running London, unlike Sadiq Khan's London, we were really successful in driving down knife crime. And basically, we did 2 things simultaneously, and you have to do both. You have to break the cycle, which means a very significant intervention. We had Operation Blunt 2 that had knife wands, knife archers at stations, amnesty bins, a really big, visible and intense intervention. In parallel to that, we had things like mentoring schemes, uniformed youth projects, making sure that young people had male role models where they didn't have a male role model in the family environment. And you've got to do both. You've got to buy yourself some breathing space and then use that breathing space to train young people out of carrying knives. And if you don't do both, you will not ultimately be successful. One of my biggest frustrations, and this angers me enormously, we handed that project on a plate to Sadiq Khan and it was working. For petulant and party political reasons, he ditched it, and now London's knife crime statistics distort the whole of the UK's knife crime statistics. And we did a load of work and it was successful and he ruined it, and kids are dying because of his petulance, and it angers me so deeply.
Right. How much time have we got? Okay, we've got 3 minutes left, so make these questions brief, can we? Gentleman there, I haven't... no, yeah, there you are, just there. Yep.
Thank you. My name's Charles Aldous, and I'm from Suffolk Coastal. My question to you is, considering many of our coastal areas are particularly left behind, what would you particularly do for them if you were leader of the opposition?
And I've got one, I'm going to take it in 2s here, so somebody else. Lady at the back there, blonde hair. That's not the reason I called you. Apologies.
Well, now we know. Thank you. James, quick question for you. would you consider doing a merger or working in partnership with Reform, and what would your number one reason be for your answer? Thank you.
Okay, two very easy questions. Over to you, James.
So I studied geography, and I don't think that there are enough geographers in public policy. I didn't study it at degree level, I studied at A level. There are not enough geographers in public policy because the fact that coastal areas have got a coastline means the maths of travelling times to public services, employment opportunities, and that kind of stuff get distorted because they all happen in one direction. And it's a phenomenon that happens all over the world. But we've got to recognise that, therefore, coastal communities suffer through physical geography disadvantages that other parts of the country don't suffer from. So we have to do something about that. Now, again, I've already touched upon what Ben Houchin is doing on the Tees Valley, which is having lower tax, a less intrusive regulatory environment. I would look to do something like that as much as possible. As I say, you can only tax and subsidise so far. Eventually, you run out of other people's money. So let's do it in a more sustainable way. Let's make sure that we kind of pump prime those coastal communities, and particularly with things like offshore wind, undersea cabling for electricity supply, things like that. I think there are some now modern opportunities for economic activity in coastal communities, which can give back some of the things we've lost when domestic tourism moved to be more international tourism, when fishing industries moved away. But we've got to recognise the physical geography of coasts does make it more difficult, so they do deserve a bit of extra support. Would I merge with Reform? No. No mergers, no deals. We don't do that. We're the Conservative Party. We are the Conservative Party.
1 minute to go.
1 minute to go. This is the party, as I say, this is the party that has done so much good, provided clean water, provided education. We wrote the blueprint for the NHS. I know the Labour Party like to claim it as though we wrote the blueprint for the NHS. This is a glorious party with a glorious history, an amazing future, and I'm not going to mortgage that to try and buy some short-term popularity or electoral gain, which I don't even think would come about. That's why I say no, because we don't succeed by being a pale imitation of anyone else. We succeed by being the best version of ourselves. Thank you.
James, thank you very much indeed. And I hope it's been even for everybody. Everyone's seen it. I'm going to ask Andy to come up and just conclude. James, you're free to go. But thank you again for coming, and it's been a really interesting evening. Thanks.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Thanks, James. Right, that's it. One final thing. It's going to come with QR codes. Going to come back on. Can everyone give their vote as to who they would vote for as leader of the Conservative Party? Oh, James, go out so you don't have to see this. Yeah. But before I do, a couple of big thanks. Firstly, the lady here next to me just said that's the best event she's been to all day, and I couldn't agree more. I'm very biased, but goodness me, this is what we're doing. It's fantastic. So, and thank you to the team for doing it. Liberty, who's put this on, has been absolutely brilliant. To those people running the mics, that's a difficult job. You stumbled a couple of times, but overall was brilliant. But perhaps the star of the show was Tabitha with the horn. She will be in the bar later, and she still has the horn, so buy her a drink. Right, I'm going to give you the results of the first poll that came in. I know you're all very interested in that. When you all voted for it, the winner overall, everyone, there was 3 ties on 22, 22 and 23%. And the winner on 33% was Tom Tugendhat when you first came in. That was the opener. Now, are we ready to reveal, where's Matthew? Matthew, are we ready to reveal the graphic on the screen for the votes coming in now? I can't see the screen. Are they on there? Is it coming? Could we have a little drum roll? Is it on? I can't see. Is it changed? Is it James? James has won. Half of James' staff, you've won that one, James. They'll take that. Half of your staff are sat in the seat, but we'll take that. Yeah, that's good. What are the figures? James, 29. Tom, yeah, James is there. Sign an autograph for those. Kemi, 23. Jenrick, 24. Well, there you go. Fantastic. What a great time. This is the key debate for this party, and long may it continue. Thank you all. Thank you, Iain, also.